Good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and mute yourself as well. If you would like to put in the chat box your agency, just so we have that on record as far as who attended. We'll get started in just a moment. We'll just give it one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. Again, if you're just joining us, please mute yourself. Okay, so hello and good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our coordinated entry training. As you're joining, again, go ahead and please mute yourself. That way we can go ahead without any interruptions. But before I get started, I just wanted to let everybody know that this training is going to be split into two parts. The first half is going to be covering the workflow from the viewpoint of an access point, as covered in the CES access point flow chart, and then the second half is going to be covering the workflow from the viewpoint of a housing agency as covered in the FCES housing agency flow chart. Since this training is scheduled to last an hour and 30 minutes, I'm going to aim to have the first half last the first 45 minutes, and then the rest of the training is going to be covering the housing agency information. So before I also get started, I want to remind everyone of a few things. As of right now, Family CES is the only one currently in HMIS. So any functionality on the individual CES will not be answered here because it is not currently operating in HMIS. Additionally, please keep in mind that in order to have access to CES functionality on your HMIS account, you have to complete the HMIS CES training prior. And your agency must also be an access point or a housing agency involved with the Family Solutions Collaborative. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. So this is an overview of the topics we're going to go ahead and cover today. The training will be demonstrating CES HMIS functionalities as they pertain to the access points in CES. If you have any questions during this training about any of the topics covered or any general CES functionality questions, please enter them in the chat box. I will be stopping at every section to make sure I answer them. However, if the specific CES question relates to your agency directly, please submit a ticket to the HMIS help desk so we can properly assist you. So what is CES and what does it mean to be part of CES? CES is a method of matching housing opportunities that ensures that they are being fairly distributed across the most vulnerable populations. CES has three main components that all work together to move the system along. These are in the form of a matchmaker, an access point, and housing agencies. Access points are agencies that connect households to CES housing opportunities while also providing services such as case management and connecting them to additional resources. I'm going to pause for a second. and see if I can mute whoever just joined us. Okay, sorry about that. So as I was saying, access points are agencies that connect households to CES's housing opportunities while also providing them services such as case management and connecting them to additional resources. Housing agencies have housing opportunities that could also be offered to households that are in CES. They receive referrals to opportunities for households that are believed to be suitable matches. And if accepted, the housing agencies would then provide housing and or housing search services to that household. It should be noted that the housing opportunity will vary depending on the type of assistance being offered, which could also vary across agencies. Matchmakers are responsible for overseeing the households on the community queue, which are people who were referred to CES. And so those people are entered by access points, and the matchmakers are to make appropriate referrals to housing agencies for the housing opportunities that the housing agencies have offered up to CES. So as we look at each role, so as we can see that each role is important to CES, and we'll begin to look at how all of this looks on HMIS, or in other words, behind the scenes. So let's pretend I'm an access point. Oh, and also before I get any comments, these are GIFs, so they will loop. I know they kind of are going a little sped up, but if you need a second, I'll go ahead and pause before moving on to the next slide, but they are going on a constant loop. So again, let's pretend I'm an access point and I just got a household that is homeless and they need housing assistance. The first step I would do is switch from my agency and go to the CES lead agency. So in this example, the Family Solutions Collaborative manages the family CES. So in the scenario you see on the screen, I'm a case manager for a test agency. I would need to switch from my test agency to the Family Solutions Collaborative. To do that, you will need to go to the upper right hand side of the screen by your name and select the drop-down icon next to your agency's name. You will see the name of the CES lead agency, so in this case, the Family Solutions Collaborative, and you would need to select that. You will have the ability to enroll a client into the CES project under the Family Solutions Collaborative at that point. If you don't see the option, you are more than likely do not have access to the additional CES lead agency. And to get access, you would need to complete the CES training. So make sure that you have the CES training under your belt, and then go ahead and ask your agency administrator to request access on your behalf. I'm going to check the chat box, see if there's any questions about that. Yes. Oh, yes, Adriana, thank you for answering her questions. We will go ahead and publish this. I'm currently also recording as well in hopes to have that up for everybody to review. Okay. So once you are in the proper CES lead agency in HMIS, you will need to search for all members of the household to make sure that they do not already have existing profiles in HMIS. I'm going to go ahead and gloss over these basic HMIS functionalities because we already have training on them. But for more information, you should review searching for clients, adding client profiles, and enrolling clients into a project on our knowledge base article, in case you're not too familiar with how to do those. So I wanted to highlight the enrollment screens for the households being added to CES because they're more than likely going to have custom questions that are going to work to gather information for the CES system. So place close attention to additional questions such as which access point is serving this household. Since in my scenario, I am working with the test agency, I will select test agency as being the access point that serves that household. This information is used for CES reports and helps CES leads paint a clearer picture of the overall system, as well as helps CES leads understand what the community needs are. So I'll give it a second so you guys can see just those additional questions we have. You'll more than likely see them right after the OC custom questions on the enrollment screen, but those ones would be specific to the CES agency, or the CES lead agency. Sounds like somebody's not muted, so I'm going to go ahead and look for them. Okay. And I think I got it, Jessica. Let me know if you still hear a beeping sound. It might have been somebody on the call that did not mute themselves. So we can go ahead and move on. So the current living situation is a new CES data element that was introduced last October, and HUD expects CES projects to begin using that information since it's been available. The purpose of collecting a household's current living situation is to capture where the client is as of when you collected that piece of information. So this needs to be recorded at project entry, where the client was staying when they began working with CES. This should also be recorded anytime the case manager interacts with the head of household or any other adult in that household. The data element can be found in the Assessments tab in the project enrollment. The list of current living situation matches the list that's provided for the prior living situation field. If this information is added at the same time, the household, when the household's being enrolled, then those two elements should match. If the household is staying in a permanent or temporary living situation, then the case manager will need to answer additional questions to prove that the client would still be in need of housing. So for example, is the client going to have to leave their current living situation within 14 days? If no, then the case manager can save the information and move on. However, if the household is expected to leave their residence within the 14 days, then additional information has to be gathered. So that other question would be, has subsequent residency been identified? And other than that, it would be, does an individual or family have resources or a support network to help obtain permanent housing? Has the client had a lease or ownership interest in permanent housing in the last 60 days? And has the client moved 2 or more times in the last 60 days? So as you can see here, those are the additional questions that show up. Again, I want to highlight it's going to be under the Assessments tab. I'll give it a second to loop back. Right there in current living situation. And that would be again under the CES project. And I don't believe I'm seeing, oh, let me see if there's any comments. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. So before a client can even get matched to a housing opportunity, they must have all of their documents uploaded in HMIS. It's important that these documents be uploaded correctly, otherwise it makes reporting on documents nearly impossible. All supporting documents need to go under the Files tab, and please remember that the release of information should go with the other releases, not here. If you have any questions as far as where releases should be going, please review our knowledge base article on releases of information. You would upload the document as you normally would, then select coordinated entry documents in the category section, and then choose one of the predefined names for the document you want to upload. This would be either homeless verification, disabling condition, or a chronically homeless verification form. Please only upload one type of document at a time. A few more things to know. One of the file types you can upload can be labeled as other if the type of document does not match any of the predefined names. Chronically homeless verification would be needed for permanent supportive housing placements, and housing verification would be required for any other type of placement. Remember to upload the supporting document under the CES lead agency. Okay, so this one's not showing up, so let me pull up the okay. So I don't believe I have any questions on that section, so I'm gonna go ahead and move on to this one. CES uses VI stats to determine how vulnerable a household might be, as well as the type of housing that would be most appropriate for them. Before a household could be added to the community queue where the matchmaker picks them for a match, for the housing opportunities available, a household must have completed a VI SPDAT and have the supporting documents on file. To add a VI SPDAT, you must edit the head of household's project enrollment, and again, this would be under the CES lead agency in HMIS. So you would go to that project enrollment and then go to the Assessments tab again, and there you would have to answer a few data elements for the VI SPDATs. We have a couple new data fields that were just added. such as the assessment location, assessment type, and assessment level. The assessment location would be the name of the agency that is completing the assessment. The assessment type is how the client is completing the assessment. So that could be in person, over the phone, or virtually. Lastly, the assessment level would be housing needs assessments, and that's just because the VI-SPDAT is a housing needs assessment. You would need to continue to go through the assessment and then click save on the record. Once it's saved, you will see the score of the assessment at the end. So in order to send them to the queue, you would need to select the CES toggle and then select refer directly to community queue. You will have the option to add a note, and this note should only pertain to the type of housing that the household needs. Once that is added, you can hit save, and then the client would be added to the community queue, and you would be able to see a notification on that client's profile. So I'm going to give it a second to loop. Again, this is just going through the VI-SPDAT as you normally would. I did mention those 3 new assessment and questions we have been added since October, again, part of the new data standards from HUD. So this is just the regular VI-SPDAT. So once those are all saved, you'll see the score right here. You want to hit this button to send them to the community queue. You'll get an automatic notes section where you can highlight any specific housing need that client might need, such as needing a downstairs unit due to having like a wheelchair. And then once you add that note, you can go back to the profile screen and see right there that they are now on the community queue. Let me look at the chat box, see if there's any questions. Okay, so first let's go over the files. I noticed that sometimes people do upload those client records to private. So typically the files, you could go ahead and upload them under your agency, and so long as they're public, anyone should be able to see them. But I know some agencies want that extra precaution, especially if clients are weary of privacy information and stuff like that. Then if they are going to be uploaded as private, go ahead and upload them under the CES lead agency. I did mention something about not uploading leases of information on there as other as well, just because it does make it harder for us on the HMIS side to determine what type of documents are on there, because we can't filter out other, since it's kind of like a free range where people can type in any kinds of titles on there. And as far as the 3 new questions, those were added in October by HUD. So I can review them again. It is assessment location, assessment type, and assessment level. The assessment location will just be the name of the agency that's completing that VI-SPDAT. So for example, SPIN is a part of the Family Solutions Collaborative, but they are the ones completing the assessment. So while they are under the CES lead agency, which would be the Family Solutions Collaborative, they would complete that VI-SPDAT, and under assessment location, instead of it saying CityNet like you see there, it would be SPIN, or the name of whatever agency you're coming from. Assessment type is how they're completing that assessment. Typically we have them in person, and that's usually the response, but due to COVID, we are seeing that people are completing them, virtually or over the phone. And that is a new data element that was introduced last year. I don't think HUD anticipated that being the case, but that's now able to, identify how the assessment was being completed. As far as the assessment level, it's kind of determining whether or not it is an assessment, a housing needs or a crisis. And it's either one or the other. As far as I'm aware, the VI-SPDAT is a housing needs assessment, so it should always be that. But it does have the option to label it as a crisis needs assessment. But in this case, because it is the VI-SPDAT, it would not be that. Let me see, there's a comment made. Sure. In order to add a VI SPDAT, you would need to be, you have to have dual access in HMIS. So you would need to complete the CES training to make sure that you have that access after your agency administrator has requested for you to have that CES access. After you switch over to the proper CES lead agency, you will enroll them as normal into whatever CES project you have. And then when you edit that enrollment, you have that assessments tab for, again, the CES project you're using, and then you'll have the drop down of all the assessments there. Like I just mentioned, the current living situation is also listed under an assessment, but so is the VI SPDAT. So you'll just go ahead and select the appropriate VI SPDAT for the person you are going to assess, and then you will have this screen right here. Okay, awesome. So it seems like I answered everyone's questions. Let me put this down again, and we'll keep going. So once the household has been added to the community queue, the referral must remain active. Otherwise, the system's going to automatically remove them from the queue for inactivity after 90 days. For the referral to appear as active, a case manager can do one of several things. A case manager can add an updated current living situation record, add a case note, select the check-in button on the referral screen, or add a CES event. I just went over how to add a current living situation, and I mentioned that one should be created at project start. However, a record should also be added anytime there's contact with the head of household or any adult in that household. This should also be updated if a new current living situation hasn't been recorded in the last 90 days. We have a training on how to add client notes, so I'm not going to be going into too much detail, but the instructions are the same. You would go to the note tab in that project enrollment, and then you would just simply add a note. So we're going to go over how to do a check-in and how to add a CES event next. To update the check-in date, you would go to the head of household's profile and go to that history tab to see the referral. And again, this is assuming that the client is already on the queue. That's how you would see this referral screen. Then you would select edit. You would be taken to the referral screen, which will contain information pertaining to the referral when you originally sent it. You will locate the last activity section right there. As you see, it's highlighted, and click on the button next to it that says check-in. This will reset the timer on the 90 days and prevent the household from being removed from the queue. But I also want to really stress that this should not be used if you are an access point, because ideally you would be working with the client even after they are referred to CES, and even if they are currently working with a housing agency to see if they're even eligible. So this is prior to them being even enrolled or accepted for an opportunity. Ideally, because they might fall out of touch with the housing agency. So before you hand them off, and once they are fully accepted, you should still be working with them. And if you're still communicating with them, you should be adding notes to their record or providing services and referrals, as well as updating the current living situation, since you are communicating with them, and that would be a contact. But that is a feature that is on HMIS, so I did want to mention it. However, I just want to note that it should not really be used if you're in housing agency. Okay, I don't see any questions about that. As we can see here, it says last activity, the date. Once you check in, it changes the date to whenever that was updated. I'll let it loop one more time. Okay. So CES events are another new data element that was first introduced in last October that HUD also wants us to use. In short, these are events that must be tracked by case managers in hopes to better understand what goes into a successful referral and outcome. Some of these events will require case managers to go back in and track the outcome for some of these events. And those two that require that follow-up would be problem solving, diversion, rapid resolution, intervention, or services. Case managers must go back in to track the outcome, such as did the household get housing as a result, or were they rehoused in a safe alternative? Another event that requires a follow-up is referral to post-placement / follow-up case management. And the outcome would be whether or not the client got enrolled into an aftercare project. The list is pretty long as far as CES events go, as you can see here. So I would encourage all CES users to go in and familiarize themselves with the events that are listed, because a lot of these things are events that naturally occur during the span of a household participating in CES, such as scheduling an appointment to have the VSPDAT completed or getting referrals to programs. So you can see here, it's quite a lengthy list, but I just wanted to highlight that there are two that you need to be followed up. Again, the ones that would require you to go back in and note whether or not something happened would be if you do problem solving, diversion, rapid resolution, intervention, or service, that is required as a follow-up. And another one would be if you list that you gave them a referral to a post-placement or follow-up case management. We want to know whether or not the client got enrolled into an aftercare project. And again, that would show up under the provide services. So just like any services, these are just events that are happening to the client. I'm not seeing any more comments. I'll go ahead to the next one. Okay, so let's say you have now sent someone off to the community queue for a CES match. If you want to review the details of the referral, you can do so by going to the referral screen. To view that, you would need to pull up the client profile for someone you know is on the community queue. Once you have their profile open, you would go to their history tab. This is one of the last things I did on that client profile, so it appears right at the top. But you could also filter it using the type filter and searching for referral. Once you have located the record, you will edit the referral to be viewable for the details. The first box will contain information about the score and who sent it, as well as that check-in button I've discussed earlier. The reassign option further down is only usable for the matchmakers, so you don't really need to pay any attention to that. And after that, we see a box that says remove from community queue, which we will discuss right after this. Then we have a notes section at the very bottom, and those are notes that should be relating to the client's household needs. And we also see a history section as far as like where they were in terms of the entire process. Right there, the history. So when they checked in, when they were added, kind of like a timeline of events. And again, this is just pertaining to the referral that was given. Sorry, do the events and activities need to be recorded while entering data as the CES agency to keep the client active on the community queue? So are you asking like whether or not they need to be under the CES lead agency? Because if so, then yes, it would all need to be recorded under that CES lead agency role. I hope that answers your question. If not, I apologize. Okay, so we're gonna keep moving. So, yes, so case notes by other agencies doesn't keep the client active. I will need to look into that because I'm wondering if you're discussing like if that client has a program enrollment by another agency. If they add a note for like some emergency shelter they're involved in, would that affect the queue status for another enrollment? I don't know if it does. However, if a case manager, for some reason in that same CES lead agency group wants to access your client, they definitely can because you guys would be all under that same group and add that case note there. But if you're saying like a separate enrollment, if they're active in that one, would that affect the referral? I haven't looked into that specifically, if two different project enrollments affect one another and the community queue stuff like that. So that's interesting. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone in the group, but I think I understand what you're saying. But I can actually go ahead and look into that maybe after this. If not, I go ahead and relay that question to my peers and see if they can do more exploring, because that I'm not too sure of. Okay. So sorry about that. All right. So exiting clients and removing them from the queue. So while we all hope that our clients can get assistance via CES, the reality is that the need exceeds the amount of housing opportunities available. And that being said, the reality is that clients will need to be housed by other means, such as finding their own housing via family or friends, relocating out of the county, applying for affordable housing, or sometimes they simply just stop working with the program. In these cases, when a household no longer needs CES for housing, we must do two things as access points, and that would be exiting them from the CES project and then removing them from the queue if they are on the queue. So again, this is only required if your client did not get assistance from CES, because if they did get referred and accepted into a housing project, then the housing agency would be the one to exit them from the CES project. And that's because if a household is referred and under review, it turns out they did not get accepted into the project for one reason or another, the hope is that they will be able to connect to that access point they were working with previously, so they don't have to start the process all over again. So the first thing you would need to do is go to the referral screen, like I mentioned earlier. Then you would go to that remove from queue section and select the reason why the client will be removed from the queue and provide the date they are being removed from the queue. After that's done, that's going to remove them from the community queue entirely. After that's done, you will edit the project enrollment and exit them from the CES project as you normally would. So that process would only slightly vary for the housing providers, but we're going to go ahead and go into more detail as to how that would look on their side. And I don't believe I have any questions for the exit part, but I'll let that loop one more time. Again, this is if the client did not receive services or does not need services from CES, or they got housed by other means, or they just fell out of touch. You wouldn't do this if they were matched and they're pending an acceptance, only if they don't need housing assistance anymore by CES for one reason or another. Okay. The last thing I want to touch on is CES reports. I won't be going into details as far as running reports go, but rather what CES reports we currently have available. We have this knowledge base article that details every CES report we have, and I encourage everyone here to look it up after this training to make sure they are able to access any reports that are interest to you. Some of these reports don't apply to everybody, and some of these reports are scheduled, meaning that you need to be added to the list we have, because it goes out automatically to your email. And in order to be added to a scheduled report, you would need to submit an HMIS ticket asking to be added to that report. So I know it's a little hard to see here, but these are all the reports currently available. Where you can access them, if it says scheduled, that means you have to be added. Data analysis tab means that you can run that by yourself. If it's scheduled, how often it's sent out, who has access to this report, and a little bit of information of what that report has. I think a comment came in. Awesome. CES report list is super helpful. It's very good to hear. Okay, so thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the chat box. If it's specific to your agency, please submit a ticket to the HMIS help desk. If you will be leaving us now, please take our user survey. It's going to help us refine these trainings. I'll send this link out later as well. And along with some of the knowledge-based articles I suggested going over if you need a little bit more basic training as far as like searching clients and stuff like that. I'll go ahead and wait 5 minutes, or actually, yeah, I'll wait a couple minutes before starting the second half of the CES Housing Agency. So again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. And I will be dropping in this user SurveyMonkey survey. Please fill it out. It'll be very helpful to us to kind of get an idea as far as how helpful these trainings are. So I'll go ahead and start in about 5 minutes. So at 10:40, I'll go ahead and start the second half of this training. Okay, hello everybody. We will go ahead and get started. If you are sitting in from the first half, these first couple slides will look very familiar to you. We'll go ahead and just get started though. So this is the overview of the topics we're going to be demonstrating for you today. The training will cover CES HMIS functionalities as it pertains to housing agencies in CES. Again, I want to stress that this is particularly more relatable to those already involved with the Family Solutions Collaborative. Currently, individual CES is not in HMIS as of right now, but we are hoping to get that started very soon. So if you don't recognize some of these functionalities and you work with the individual CES, that is because it's not currently there. But it's still helpful to see what's to come as it currently stands. So if you have any questions during this training about any of the topics covered or any general CES functionality questions, please enter them in the chat box. I'll be stopping at the end of every section to make sure I answer it. If the specific CES question is related to your agency directly, please submit a ticket to the HMIS help desk so we can properly assist you. Okay, so what is CES and what does it mean to be part of CES? CES is a method of matching housing opportunities that ensures that they are going to be distributed amongst the most vulnerable populations. CES has three main components that all work together to move the system along, which are the matchmakers, the access points, and the housing agencies. Access points are agencies that connect households to CES housing opportunities while also providing them services such as case management and connecting them to additional resources. Housing agencies have housing opportunities that can be offered to households that are in CES. They receive referrals to opportunities for households that are believed to be suitable matches, and if accepted, the housing agency would be the ones to provide housing and or housing search services to that household. It should be noted that the housing opportunity would vary depending on the type of assistance offered, as well as across agencies. Matchmakers are responsible for overseeing the households on the community queue, which would be entered by the access points, and they also are responsible for making appropriate referrals to the housing agencies. As we can see here, each role has an important role in CES, so we will begin to look at how this looks like on HMIS, or in other words, behind the scenes. Housing agencies' role in CES is to offer the actual housing to the households on the community queue. The type of opportunity will vary across housing assistance type, whether that be rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing, and the agency providing the assistance. The housing agencies will offer the housing opportunities and then wait for the referrals via the matchmaker. Once the matchmaker has given the referrals to the housing agencies, the housing agency can either accept or deny the referral. If the housing agency accepts the referral, they then enroll the household into their project and then begin working with them. The referral tab will contain a lot of information about clients, where they are and where they are in the process. To get to the referral tab, you would select the referral button at the upper right-hand side from the search screen. So you would start, like when you log in, let me wait for this to loop back. You would find the search screen here and then hit referrals. Sometimes I have to hit search first and then referrals because otherwise this button might not appear. So once you're on the referral page, you'll see several smaller tabs here. The pending tab consists of clients that are currently matched to your agency for a housing opportunity. The community queue tab would contain households that are currently on the queue waiting to be matched for any housing opportunity. The analysis tab, I won't really go into too much because we currently do not use it. It does have some information, but a lot of that information is also duplicated on the CES reports we'll be mentioning at the end of this training. The completed tab contains households that were matched through CES, a CES referral, and has been accepted into your housing project, and then ultimately enrolled in that project. The denied tab contains names of households that were matched to your housing opportunity, but were ultimately denied by the household or the agency, meaning that the household was either not interested in the opportunity or the agency determined the household was not eligible for that opportunity. The Referrals tab is a list of referrals that were sent. However, since the matchmaker is the only one sending referrals, it's not really helpful to housing agencies. The Availability tab will contain housing opportunities that are available to be occupied by the agency. And the Open Units tab is also a report that is not often used, so we'll go ahead and bypass that just because we do send out the available housing opportunity list from HMIS on a weekly basis to household or to any housing or any partner agencies that are currently participating with the CES group. So when the matchmaker sends a referral to the housing agencies, those clients will appear in the pending section under that referral tab, like I mentioned. The absolute first step a housing agency should do when getting a referral is go to the pending tab and change the status from pending to pending in process. What that does is inform the system that the client is currently being under review for eligibility for an opportunity. If for some reason the housing agency is taking a while to review the client, they should select that check-in button next to the right above the status section. And that's because after 90 days of inactivity, the client will be automatically removed from the queue before a decision can be reached. However, a client really shouldn't be sitting at pending in process for that long. So let me show you where that is. This client has been sent to our agency and they are currently awaiting eligibility determination. We are going to change them to pending in process. If we're still under review after a couple days, go ahead and hit that check-in button because otherwise they will be removed from the pending tab altogether. So it's up to your agency to determine whether or not to accept the referral, but I wanted to note that agencies should be using the contact tab to find the latest contact information for the client. Additionally, you can also use the location tab we see here. So in case the client's kind of hard to get a hold of, once your agency has determined that they will be accepting the referral, you will simply go to that program tab and enroll them into the project they have a referral to. If the client is part of the household, make sure to include everybody and indicate that the client was referred to the project via a CES referral using the toggle under the project enrollment. And after that, you would enroll the client like normal. So let me show you how that looks like on this screen since it loops. Assuming this client was under review, we looked at the contact tab to get the latest contact information, looked at any location information to see if there's anything in there in case we can't get a hold of them, ultimately decided to enroll them. So we're enrolling them into that project right there. We'll see here program placement is as a result of a referral, include their members, and then that takes you to the regular project enrollment. Let me see if I have any questions so far. I'll let it loop once more. So again, it's really important to switch from pending to pending in process so that way the matchmaker knows that you are currently reviewing that client. Constantly check in as much as possible if you're still gathering some information to determine eligibility for that client, because it would be an absolute shame for them to fall off the queue and kind of create some issues there with trying to reconnect them to the system if they kind of just fall off and no one realizes that. So again, indicate that it was as a result of a referral using that toggle and include any other additional members if appropriate. So this one's not loading either, so let me pull this up on my screen. Okay. So now that the referral was reviewed and accepted, you will see that the client is no longer appearing under that pending tab. They are now appearing under the completed tab. But we are not done yet. When a client is taken off the community queue, they are not automatically removed from the CES project. So the last step would be to switch over to the CES lead agency and then exit them from that CES project. I want to mention that this is the only time you would need to switch over to that CES lead agency for any of these functionalities. All other tasks mentioned here should be done under your own HMIS agency. After you switch over to that CES lead agency, you will exit the client like you normally would, except in this case, you must answer the destination field as where the client is expected to go after. So for example, if the client was matched to a rapid rehousing opportunity and then later enrolled into that rapid rehousing project, the destination for the client would be rental by client with rapid rehousing or equivalent subsidy, because that is where the client is expected to go. After that, you will continue to exit them like you normally would. So again, they're no longer in that pending tab. They're in the completed tab because you enrolled them in that project via that referral. You switch over to the CES lead agency. You see that they are now there on that new project. You want to go ahead and exit them from that CES project. And I should mention, these are GIFs, so they are moving pretty fast. They are on a loop though, so it's just recreating the same scenario over and over. I apologize for that. Let me check the chat box, see if there's any questions. Can the access point continue to update the check-in dates during the referral process to keep the client active in CES, or just the housing provider can complete the check-in after the referral? Either or, so long as someone's working with the client, definitely an access point should still be working with the client even if they are pending in process, just in case that for whatever reason, they do not get accepted, that connection should still be there. And if the housing agency returns a client because they are unable to get a hold of them, maybe the housing agency should be able to help them. So Christine asked if the housing agency should be exiting them or if the Family Solutions does the exit, because she thought the clients enrolling the client in a permanent supportive housing exits them from CES. As far as I am aware, once a client is enrolled, that takes them off the queue, but it does not take them off the actual project. I don't know if that's different from permanent supportive housing or if that varies by project type. I can enter a ticket with my team and see if that's changed. As far as I was aware though, that shouldn't be any different, but I can write that down as a question to look into. So does PSH exits also exit from CES, like auto exit them? Okay. So I'm not seeing any other questions as far as this portion goes, so I'll go ahead and take this down and then continue with my screen. Okay. So now let's look to see what needs to be done when a referral does not work out. This could happen because a client was not eligible for an opportunity, or if the client themselves did not want that particular opportunity. So assuming the client has already been labeled as pending in process and was reviewed for the opportunity, once it's been decided that the referral will not be used, you will go to that status section again and switch it from pending in process to denied. You will see a series of additional questions that now must be answered. You will always select yes for sending, let's see right here. So pending in process right here, we're gonna go ahead and click denied. Send to community queue. You're always going to put yes, unless you know for a fact that client no longer needs to be served through CES. You then must identify who rejected the referral. Was it the agency or was the client? And then after that, you would need to provide the reason under the denied reason field. So it has a drop down of options to choose from, and you can also put denial information as well to give more information as to what happened. So let's look at that again. Pending in process. It was denied. We want to send them back to the queue. The provider denied that referral due to lack of eligibility. And more specifically, the client was not disabled. So assuming this was like a PSH project. The client will appear in that denied tab now in that referral section, and the opportunity will reappear on the availability tab. So you can get a new match for that same opportunity again. So as we see here, denied, the client's here now. And the opportunity that was given to them originally is back here under that availability tab. Okay. So we have covered how to accept and reject opportunities, and we mentioned that the housing agencies offer housing opportunities to the CES system. So the last thing we'll cover in HMIS is how to add and edit those opportunities. We will go back to that referral tab and go to that availability section. You will see all the projects from your agency that are available for matches, to accept matches. All the projects should be set to having limited availability, and that's so you're able to have that drop-down menu, and so you can view and edit the bed openings for them. If you want to add an opportunity, you would do so by adding either a single opportunity or multiple if it's more than one. After that, you would just need to provide today's date, any notes pertaining to the opportunity, and then hit save. You might have additional fields that are asking you to identify the criteria for that specific opportunity, such as if the household needs to have children within an age range, like you see in our example here. Once that's saved, the opportunity will be ready to receive referrals. If for whatever reason you need to remove an opportunity, you would simply click on that trash icon and it will be deleted and the opportunity will no longer get referrals. So that's commonly occurs for, if for, let's say, an agency gave an opportunity, it didn't work out like we saw in our last example, that client was denied, that bed is now available, or that unit or opportunity is now available for a new match. Let's pretend we ran out of funding and we no longer need a referral for that opportunity anymore. You would just, after you've denied that client, go to the availability tab and select that drop-down menu to view it, and then just hit that trash icon. So that way you don't get a new referral to that opportunity. I'm going to let it play once more. Okay, so the last thing I want to touch on is the CES reports. I'm not going to go over how to run these reports because we do have training on that already, but I want to go over the CES reports we currently have available. This information is available on a knowledge base article called the CES reports. And I would encourage everybody here to look it up after this training to make sure they are able to access any of the reports that are of interest to you. Some of these reports don't apply to everybody, and some reports are scheduled, meaning that you would need to submit a ticket with HMIS and ask to be added to the email list because it gets sent out. So right here we have the name of the report. That's helpful to let us know which report you're talking about if you want to be added to the scheduled one. It shows you where you can find it. So if it says data analysis tab, that means you can run that on your own. If it's scheduled, that means you have to be added to that email list. If it's scheduled, how often we send it out, who has access to that report, and then a little information about what that report has. So I just wanted to go ahead and encourage everybody to make sure they are familiar with what we already have available. All right, thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat box. If it's specific to your agency, please submit an HMIS help desk ticket. If you are leaving us now, I'm gonna go ahead and send this survey link to everybody just to let us know how we're doing, how you feel about this training. Sorry, sent it to everybody. This is gonna help us really fine tune what kind of training we have available. If there's anything you're not too happy, if there's anything we did good, that's really helpful for us to know so we can fine tune them and continue to improve upon these trainings as we continue to offer them throughout the year. I'm going to be sticking around for another 5 minutes in case anybody has any additional questions we haven't already answered. These 2 questions I noted down. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can figure the answer to this out right away. This is my last day though, so I won't be able to answer them if not within the next hour. I'm going to have to pass them along to my team. Thank you everybody for joining us. I hope this was very helpful to you all.